Good evening. Welcome to the 48th edition of Guru Manthan. Guru Manthan is a weekly webinar, 50 discussions with educationists and thinkers. It's being hosted by the Vivekananda Institute for Leadership Development. Our mission is to build human and social capital to enhance the potential of individuals and institutions across the development sector. We work across the sector with four key partners: the government, NGOs, corporates, and the community. This particular series of lectures is essentially aimed at being a platform for teachers to discuss, share, debate, and learn from very diverse perspectives and practices in the field of education from across the world. Week after week, for the last 48 weeks, we have been meeting on every Saturday and hearing from practitioners, policymakers, and thinkers. We have had the who's who in the space of education, right from Dr. Kasturi Rangan to the Kalkeri Sangeet Vidyalaya in Dharwad, share their experiences. Today we have with us a very interesting person, Mr. Ashwath Bharat, an engineer by qualification, and if I may say, sort of lost his track and became a teacher. And he's been with the Teach for India. He's been a fellow himself and is now heading the teacher education platform, FIRKI, an initiative of the Teach for India Fellowship. Today he'll be talking about reimagining education and leadership for our country. Welcome to the series, Ashwath. And before I just hand over to you, we'll follow the regular template of 25 minutes of initial remarks and then another 25-30 minutes of moderated Q&A. And we will have closing remarks from Ashwath for about 3-4 minutes towards the end. Welcome once again, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Praveen. I think this is a great opportunity for me. I'm quite excited to be here, especially in a space which is surrounded by educators. I really enjoy being part of education, and in many ways, I feel I found my track making this switch. And it's always great to be part of a group of teachers, right? Before I just quickly also add to my introduction, I'm going to request teachers, whoever can, educators, whoever here, if you can go to the chat window and quickly just introduce yourself, tell us where you're joining from. And meanwhile, I'll just introduce myself as well. So I was born and brought up in Hyderabad. As Praveen said, I did my BTech in biotechnology, very specifically, not just an engineer, but a biotech engineer. And then I did my master's by research in bioinformatics. I think it was in my master's where my interest towards politics, public administration, public policy started growing. And that's where I started to kind of really say the best way to explore this is through the development sector. So before Teach for India, I actually worked in an NGO called as SODIUS, which is based out of, I'm not sure if you all know this, but it's part of Vellore district, and it's near Jolarpete. There's a set of villages there, and we worked there, and I worked there for a few months, and that's after which I came to the fellowship. I see a lot of people have already started introducing yourself. We have people from Mysore, Mangalore, Bangalore, Coimbatore, and Kodagu. Okay, that's fantastic. Okay, I know all of us would have had a busy week, and Saturdays usually marks an end of the week, at least psychologically. Sunday, we look forward to doing different things. So just to make sure I have everybody's attention and energy in this space, we're going to start off by a quick quiz. We're going to take only 3 minutes to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pop one question in front of you. You'll have 1 minute to answer. And what we are going to see is who's going to give the right answer in the quickest time. And please use the chat window for that. Yeah. So here we go. We get started with the first question. Very simple. A bat and ball costs 1 rupee and 10 paise. The bat costs 1 rupee more than the ball. What is the cost of the ball? Right? Whoever can give the right answer and quickest in the chat window will be great. I'll repeat, a bat and ball costs rupees 1 and 10 paise. The bat costs 1 rupee more than the ball. What is the cost of the ball? We have Praveen saying 0.5 paise. Okay. 10 paise from Vani. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, so I'll request you to give the first answer that comes to your mind. Don't think about it too much. 10 paise, a lot of 10 paise is coming. Okay. Usually we'll spend more time trying to really unpack this, but in the interest of time, the correct answer is what Praveen has given, which is 5 paise. I think the best way to look at it is sometimes to work backwards. So for example, if we say the cost of the ball is 10 paise, and the bat's cost is 1 rupee more than that. So the cost of the bat becomes 1 rupee 10 paise. So then the total cost becomes 1 rupee 20 paise, whereas the total cost here is 1 rupee 10 paise. So if you start with 5 paise, then bat is 1 rupee 5 paise, and so 1 rupee 10 paise. Okay, let's move to the next question quickly. If it takes 5 machines 5 minutes to make 5 mobiles, how long will it take 100 machines to make 100 mobiles? Again, fastest finger here. 5 minutes, one answer. Another answer, 5 minutes. Shantala and Vani are saying it's 5 minutes. Thank you so much. Machama is also saying 5 minutes. Divya is also saying 5 minutes. 5 minutes is absolutely the right answer. So I'm not going to spend more time on this. The last question. In a lake, there is a patch of lotus flowers. Every day, the patch doubles in size. If it takes 48 days for the patch of lotus flowers to cover the entire lake, how long would it take to cover half the lake? So we have a lake of patch of lotus flowers. Every day it doubles in size. It took 48 days for it to cover the entire lake. How long did it take to cover half the lake? We're getting a lot of answers, which is saying 47. Fantastic. So with that, I'm not going into the why that's the right answer, but 47 is the correct answer. Again, the trick is to work backwards. That's the hint I'm leaving you with. Now that I have your attention and energy, what I would like for you to share is, what is a challenge that you can currently think of? When you look around, what is a challenge you think you can currently think of? Maybe one way to look at it is, what is a challenge you currently think is crippling our society? Developing social skills in kids. Okay. Thank you, Shantala. Knowing and doing the gap. Reaching out for support. Okay. Looking back on our education system, connectivity, values. And if you start to zoom beyond the education system, what kind of challenges do you think today it exists in the society? Again, I'm going to push you to think beyond the education system. Okay, Rohit is saying humanity, lack of integrity, health, corruption, right? Even when we look at it, we see there are a lot of issues that is crippling a system, right? Let it be in terms of gender. Last 1.5 years, we've seen how health has been an issue. And quite often, I ask myself, like, why are things the way they are, right? And I want you to hold on to this and all the different responses people have given in terms of economic stability, intolerance, equity, poverty. And we'll come back to this. But before that, I would like to invite you all into a thought experiment here, right? Today, I can see we have close to 90 people on the call. I think for easy calculations, let's assume there are 100 people on the call. And let's assume that each one of you who's part of this call represent the 320 million children in our country, right? Together, this group, which is part of the Zoom, and those who are part of the stream, are together, we are representing the 320 million children of our country. And let's kind of go on a journey as the child grows, right? So we'll start with, 4%. So as we look at enrollment as per right to education, right? At the start itself, we lose 4% of our students. So in this call, if you're starting off with 90 to 100 people, a few of you are already out of the education system even before, being part of what is called as the race, right? And when you look at 4% of 320 million, we're talking about 1.2, close to 1.2 crore children, if I'm not wrong, who are actually dropping out or who are not even part of the system, right? So in this group, let's assume around at least 4 to 5 of you are already out of access to any professional development opportunities or learning that has brought you here. And as we move ahead, right, as the child grows, close to 48% of the children in grade 5 cannot read a grade 2 text. And what this actually means is now, even if the child goes to school, what they're engaging with is not relevant. It's not up to the learning level of, where they are. And education starts to become irrelevant. So in this group, think about if 40 people, 40 of us out of the 96, 97 of us who are here, around 45 of us are out of the system by the time we reach grade 5, right? And as we move forward, when we look at grade 10 and going to college, only 24% of children are able to go to college, right? And I want you to think about this because I want to also hear from you on why you think this is the case, right? So if we are again bringing it back to this thought experiment in this room of 100 people, right? Only 24 of us will go to college. We'll finish our 10th grade and be positioned to go to college, right? The remaining 76 are out of the race at this point of time, right? And just think about what were you doing when you finished grade 10? What were your aspirations? Who were there to guide you? And what it means for 76% of our children in our country to not have that, right? And finally, when you look at, who an undergraduate degree, only 10% of children in the country today are graduates who finish college, right? To some extent. And what that would mean is if I could take the liberty, I would say Ramesh, Praveen, myself, Asha, Rohit, Uma, Bhagyalakshmi, Radhika, Bhuvana, Devdas, and Padmini. We are the only ones who've actually, made it up and have, an opportunity to teach, to do what we want. The rest of you who are part of this have dropped out of the race. And take a minute to think about how does that make you feel, right? And even the 10% today who graduate in, segmented socioeconomic schools, where there is no real immersion of how diverse a society is, right? And I want to pause here and I would like to get your thoughts. Either feel free to unmute yourself or come on the chat window and say, why do you think this is the case? Y'all are all teachers, y'all are all educators. Why do you think this is the case? If anybody would know about this, I think you would know about this because day in and day out, y'all are able to face that reality and give your best. So why do you think this is the case? I see Vignesh is raising his hand. If it's possible to unmute him, we can look at that, or otherwise Vignesh will request you to use the chat window for now. Lack of inspiration, aspiration and support, affordability, access. Why is it that only 10% of our children are able to go to college and complete college? Exposure, lack of opportunity. And while you're thinking about that question, think about what is the impact it has hence on the society, right? And that is where I would like to actually bring back what we started off with, in terms of what are the challenges today we are seeing in the society, right? And we believe that it is deeply rooted in the educational crisis, right? Unless an entire generation is able to get transformational education, a lot of things in society will not change in a lifetime, right? And we believe that the education crisis, which a lot of you have spoken about, lack of guidance, lack of opportunity, lack of exposure, I think it plays out across different segmentation. So it's not just what's happening in the classroom and school, but it plays across the entire infrastructure that is enabling and supporting the classroom, right? I think initially, before even the talk started, Praveen was making an interesting remark, and it made me think that today, for a teacher, everybody around the teacher cares about what the teacher is doing outside the classroom than inside the classroom, right? Today, if there is a crisis, immediately teachers are deported to kind of resolve those crises. And we'll come back to that. But What we are saying is this is where Teach for India kind of found its purpose and was founded in 2009, right? And what we believe is that how do we extend an invitation to every person who's there, saying that what if you could build a nation while building your own future, right? And with that proposition, or with that intent, or with that invitation, basically Teach for India came into with the vision saying that every child in a country deserves an excellent and equitable education. And by achieving that, we'll be able to be closer to an India which is free of poverty and filled with love. Today, we understand that this is not something that can be just handled by changing curriculum or looking at teacher professional development, because there are so many layers to it. What is the role of parents? What's the role of different government departments? And we believe that unless there is an entire movement of people who are building an urgency around education, just like we do about health, environment, things are not going to change in our lifetime, right? And when we talk about excellent education, what do we mean, right? And at the core of what we've understood and what we think beyond academics, beyond interdisciplinary approach, project-based learning, FLN, STEM, we believe that an education has to be rooted in values. Like, how do we get students to be curious, to be courageous, to voice their opinions, to be compassionate, to be able to collaborate with others, to be critical thinkers? How does an education actually lead to self actualization? How does it lead to working together with your classmates, with your peers? And how does it really kind of bring you into the forefront of looking at what it means as part of nation building, right? And that is what we are kind of focusing, apart from just delivering academics and other aspects of schooling. And so with that, today where we are as an organization and as a program, this is just an information, is that today we are spread across 7 cities, directly the fellowship program. We have close to 900 fellows working in 260 schools, which is actually 0.0015% of the total schooling in the system, total schools which are there in the country, right? And I'll talk more about the program, but the fellows who've gone through the 2 years of fellowship, today we have 3,400 alumni in the system, with close to 60 to 70% of them working directly in education as teachers, much like yourself, as school leaders, principals, teacher trainers, working with parents in helping with community building programs, working at the level of policy and starting their own initiatives as well. So I thought the best way to really give you a glimpse about what the fellowship is probably talking a little bit about my own journey. So in 2012, after working in SODUS, when I had applied for the fellowship, once selected, I went through a 5-week intense residential training to start off with. And in this training, what I was exposed to was much like what teachers are, which is aspects of pedagogy, classroom culture, psychology of learning. What is the role of a teacher? How do you engage with parents? How do you make lesson plans? How do you differentiate? How do you use data? And we also had the opportunity to practice this, right? And through the 2 years of the fellowship, so I taught math, and that's the reason why I started with a math quiz, because math is something easily I connect with, but I'm hoping that I've not alienated most of you by starting off with a math question, because there's a general fear about math. But I taught math for 120 students. I taught grades 3, 4 in my first year, and grades 4 and 5 in my second year. And what I learned through the fellowship is that while I had a program manager who's supporting me, while we had a lot of trainings, conferences, step backs to really upskill me, I think what really the fellowship left me with is that saying that when we started the year, our students tested on ASSET, which is one of these competitive exams which is available. And we were almost 30% below the national average back then. This is in 2013, right? And over the end of the year, what we were able to do is all our students, all the 120 students except for one, were on par with the national average in terms of English, math, and science. And this is not just because of one teacher. There were other fellows, other teachers in the school. Together, we worked on this, right? And what it really left me with is that irrespective of the background a child comes from, right? Their poverty or the lack of access cannot dictate their destiny, right? If you're giving the right environment and the right support is given, every child will meet your expectations, if not, rise above that. The second thing which it realized me is there are a lot of bright spots in the system. There are a lot of teachers who are day in and day out, doing phenomenal work. but there's not enough platform to, give them the due recognition to celebrate and learn from. That was a second learning which I had. So with that, with my fellowship, I basically moved on. I start to work with the government relations team in Teach for India, again, with my interest in public administration. I worked in government relations for 3 years, and largely towards, projects with the local government, state government, and central government around teacher education, English language, setting up SMCs. And I think what that experience really got me, and we always joke about this, saying that sometimes working with the government is a spiritual process. So I think it definitely pushed my skills, and helped me really look at what is it to make collective contextual vision and work together as equal partners. But with that understanding and just my deep passion for teaching, I basically joined FIRKI and kind of started leading the project since 2017. And this is where I'm kind of moving into the second part of this presentation, again keeping in mind the time as well. So going back to the learning crisis we explored as part of the thought experiment, what we really believe is at the heart of the learning crisis is also the teaching crisis, right? And again, while I'm presenting this, this is not to say this is the case everywhere, but this is the case which is prevalent, right? Right. It is not to say that there are teachers who have not kind of come here with high aspirations. This is as their first preference and really working in. But by and large, what we've seen is how the system is geared towards today, let it be pre-service or in-service support, or even looking at teachers as a highly aspirational profession, and going to the earlier point of being actually interested with what teachers are doing in the classroom. I think there's a big gap there, right? And to address that teaching crisis is where we conceptualized FIRKI and launched it in 2013. And the idea is that whatever practices that we are learning from developing teachers towards transformational outcomes in different regions, in government schools, in affordable private schools, how can we make it available in a simple and meaningful way for other teachers in the country to benefit from? But over the years, our belief and our version of the online platform has also evolved. Today, where we are standing is to see if FIRKI can be like a one-stop site for different teacher needs, where they can come learn courses at their own pace, be part of webinars with experts, get certified, connect with others, be celebrated for their practices. I won't get into too much details about what the platform is, but to quickly give you a summary of it, we have close to 220 courses. We have courses in English and 5 Indian languages as well, which is Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Marathi, and Hindi. Apart from that, we also have a space for teachers to kind of come together and discuss, share their resources and their plans. And we've also, much like these webinars, partnered with several organizations. In fact, Praveen, very similar to the Guru Manthan series of 50, when COVID hit us in March, April of last year, we actually did a very similar effort called Learning During Lockdown, where we put a series of webinars and synchronous spaces for teachers to understand what does online learning mean, coping with stress, what is the impact of COVID, like just covering various topics. We've also partnered with more than 20 organizations like British Council, Afsara Academy, Khan Academy, Life Labs for specific content aligned to grades and subjects such as language, math, science, social studies. Today, we have more than 1 lakh users on the platform. What we've also seen is that there's also interest, especially in South Asia and Africa, because I think the context is more relatable to us than, what's the popular material which is there, which is usually of Western, of Europe, or of US. But I also want to talk to you about one more thing, and I'll just share this document. So last year, when the pandemic hit and school shut down, I think it really pushed us towards a pause as an education system, which also then kind of subsequently pushed us to reflect on what is the real purpose of education. Because if we are just going to do what we are doing in person through online medium, we've realized that that's not going to be as effective as doing it in person, and it's not going to be honestly as fun also, both for you and for the learner. And with the new education policy really laying out a new roadmap for the coming decade and really putting back the focus on teachers and acknowledging that the work that do is the work of nation building. We put a conference together last October with more than 35 partners. Sorry, the wrong screen. Right? This was a 5-day conference where we really explored various kind of pieces. We had keynote sessions, we had master classes. So there were live classes on teachers teaching trigonometry, science, conducting parent-teacher meeting. Essentially, it was a space where students, parents, and teachers came together, both in terms of panels and as individuals, to really talk about how are they reimagining education in the coming decade in light of the new education policy and the pandemic. I've shared the file. Oh, I think Praveen, I've shared it with you. If it's possible, if you can share it with everybody on the chat, do have a look, because as part of the conference, what we also did with our partners is that we also launched white papers, and these white papers are accessible for any school, organization, government bodies, and they're all aligned to the new education priorities. So if you're looking at art integration, or if you're looking at what does it mean to train principals, or working with parents, or what is the idea of 21st centuries and how can you really bring it, or teacher professional development, early childhood education, we worked with organizations which have been spending their time and expertise on it to create these white papers. All of the links are accessible in that document, which I've shared in the chat window. Lastly, I'm coming back to this slide, right? Because what we believe constitutes an excellent education for our students is also deeply rooted in the kind of leadership we are trying to build, right? And so today, even with our fellows, what we are trying to bring in centers, what kind of a person are you turning up to be, right? And what are the values you're operating with? And are you looking at your own development in the lens of self, others, and India, right? I'll pause here and I'll actually I do have a couple more slides, Praveen, but maybe I'll come back to it later. Let's open it up for questions and let's see how the conversation flows, and accordingly we can take it in that direction.
Thank you. You're right on time. So we can invite questions in the chat box. As we start getting the questions, I have a couple of questions to sort of start off.
Yes, please.
It's very encouraging to see how Teach for India as a program has grown over the last 10, 11 years. Because I recollect 2008, December, Shaheen had come to the college where I was studying, and she had given a talk where they were recruiting for the first batch of fellows. And there was not much of interest at that point, but it has really snowballed into a big program, not just in India, but across various locations. Teach for America was a success, and I myself was associated with Teach for Bangladesh and Teach for Nepal. So it's very interesting to see how a sort of a volunteering movement has started addressing educational issues. So are there any big lessons that have been learned for two points of view? One is from an education system challenges point of view. The second one is as a volunteering effort, maybe similar efforts, even in the climate space, might actually work.
It's absolutely necessary. I completely agree. Yeah, I think one thing which I like to clarify is while it sounds like we are bringing volunteers, it's actually a full-time commitment. We in fact pay stipends, and during the fellowship, fellows are not double shifting with things. And we do have 70% of them staying directly in the core education sector as well. So we are also it's a career shift that plays out there. I think the biggest lesson is that if you're looking at the education system today, we can talk about issues at the level of, teacher professional development, resources, the infrastructure of classrooms, curriculum, policy changes, priorities of the system beyond enrollment, for example. But what we believe is that if we had to put our resources, if we had 100 rupees and we had to put our resources somewhere, we would put it on teachers, right? Because the irony of education, or what is counterintuitive, is while we are constantly looking for solutions at scale, true education lies in that individual's child self-actualization and, knowing their own strengths, understanding the opportunities which are there, pursuing their passion, right? And we believe that teachers are best positioned to do that, right? And so the question, I think, is that how can we hence bring the brightest and the most compassionate into teaching? right? So that's been one thing which has seen the success, I think, of the, say, if you're calling it successful in that, I'll kind of take that liberty and kind of ride on it and say that success if you're seeing in Teach for India or other Teach for chapters, right? The second is, while we believe that there are educational institutions and we should all operate deeply with respect and trust on the credibility and the work they bring, we also understand that education is a little bit more complicated when you look at the overall budgeting, it being in concurrent list of center and state, trying to cater to multiple languages in a state based on representations of population. We believe that the scope to innovate, the scope to keep updating shouldn't necessarily rely only on the system itself, right? And that's where I think many of our players like yourself or us as well comes try to work on these things. So if you ask me what is our end game, our end game, of course, apart from reaching our vision, is to say that how do these experiments actually really strengthen the system for them to integrate if it really makes sense and take it forward, right? So that's how we would actually look at success in two ways, yeah, of both putting the efforts on teachers and saying that how does it over time becomes part of the system.
Yeah, the other question where even I keep getting challenged quite a bit is you and me, we are not qualified teachers.
Yeah.
So through the fellowship, maybe we are recruiting unqualified teachers because we don't have a formal teaching degree, and we are hoping that we will be able to solve the challenges of the education system like it was an engineering problem.
Yeah.
So where do you start? What's your take on that?
Yeah. I mean, my take is it's a very interesting analogy because today, though it seemed like a decade or 2 decades back, we solved the engineering problem with directly number of engineers. Today, we see that it's also the quality of engineers and how things have evolved. I think I'm going back to the point saying that, like, who decides to join B.Ed, right? I think let's start with them. Like, we would call a B.Ed student today as an unskilled teacher, right? And in that context, I think whoever's coming into the fellowship is also coming in with the same level of blank slate, so to speak. I think I think the more important point here is that who is becoming a teacher and who's kind of supporting them in that, right? Like today, what we are seeing is that the way B.Ed pre-service degrees are rolled out, and I shouldn't even be saying this, but I do know people in my own network who've actually paid and got their degrees. Maybe some had a condition of taking the assessment while some didn't even have that, right? Even a lot of times when I worked and spoke to teachers, a lot of teachers necessarily say this is not the first choice they had. This eventually became a fall safe because there could be pressure at home, commitments of managing the household and various other things. So I think the bigger question is, are we able to bring our brightest and most compassionate into the field of teaching? Because the process of teaching has to be understood beyond a B.Ed degree to the process of nation building and what you unlock in each child, right? And in that process, the 2 years of the fellowship, if you look at what the NCERT's B.Ed curriculum, there's almost 90% overlap. There are certain things we don't give as much focus to. We emphasize more on reflective practice and training being ongoing, but it kind of covers a lot of those things. So over the 2 years as well, fellows are actually ready to continue to teach. But you're right, we don't have an official degree, and that's something we are exploring now with the new education policy. The National Council Teacher of Education has also kind of called for partners to look at pre-service education. So those are things which we are trying to look at. Yeah.
Bharat, Ashwath, I have a question that's...
yes, please, Ramesh.
This is the... In a sense, I'm trying to put you in a spot, but I'll go ahead and do that. Now, when I look at people like you, Praveen, or even others, I think, do you also find that at times people like you speak from a dimension or a level that the teachers that you're speaking to at the moment, or not, I don't mean this platform right now, but the teachers, are you speaking over them in a sense? And do you find that as a challenge in the sense that you are not able to relate to them at a level at which they find themselves in, and the level from which you think, and therefore, how often do you come across this disconnect, and how do you manage to get over that disconnect,
Yeah.
if there is a disconnect?
Yeah. See, I think it's very natural, right, Ramesh? Like right now, from the position where you are, maybe some of the things I am saying or what you are intending to say will definitely go over mine or even our current participants as well, right? I think that's a very natural thing to be, which is there, which comes from identity, upbringing. There are so many contexts to it. But if you're talking about strictly in terms of the professional sense, like it depends on where your interest and where you've spent your time building experience and learning as well, right? While without making it very subjective, I think let's just step back and look at teaching as a profession, right? In the profession, do you believe that teaching is actually an aspirational and important job? The second thing is, do you think like any other professions which requires you to continuously, own your skills, get feedback on your work? You look at doctors, you look at any professions in any even private sector companies, there's constant emphasis on professional development that's relevant for you. And it's not something that is necessarily imposed by a state, right? I think what I'm trying to say here is that while we might be something which is, while we are speaking and it might not necessarily connect with the teachers, we spend significant time with, fellows, with teachers, and understanding and constantly adapting ourselves. But eventually there's going to be that loss which is there. But the point is, what is the purpose behind doing this? Is it purpose is coming from understanding that professional development is important? It's to understand that the scope of teaching is it wider than just the academic subjects. I think those are the important points which I think we can always connect with.
Okay. And the second question is a follow through on that itself is that I think you spoke about the fact that we are not trying to get the best people into teaching. We seem to be, this is not a new challenge. It's been something that we've been grappling with for a very long time. The issues are at the issues that we all know that there are fundamental issues as to why we don't get the best people into teaching. Because while we can talk about passion, we can talk about the need to have bring passion into this and all of that. You touched upon it, but there are fundamental issues why some people, you can't say that that teaching is only about public good and they must not have any private gain at all.
Absolutely.
I think there are fundamental issues that don't seem to have been taken care of for a very long time. And I'm not just talking about the monetary aspect. I'm also talking about uh, several
Career
other
growth.
aspects, the personal, professional level, and all of that.
Yeah.
Have you or your foundation that have worked on any of those aspects at all at any time?
See, I think the core part of our program is teachers in classrooms, right? And in the process of, teachers being effective in the classroom, I think there are various things that comes in, Ramesh. So, which is both the training, whom we recruit, what is our selection model, how do we know whom we are bringing in? So, I think that is where our strength has been. We do have alumni who ventured, to pick up the pieces of interest or work in geographies that we haven't. So in that context, I think when you're looking at how do I frame this, I'm just kind of saying what would be a good way to frame this. Yeah, can you actually repeat your question? It'll help me
Yeah.
reframe.
So what I said is, I in a sense asked you, aren't we making assumptions at a level of we are saying the teachers need to come in with passion and all that is very great. I'm saying I concede that all of those things are important, but we also know at a fundamental level the teachers come in
Yeah,
for a variety of reasons. They get
yeah,
into this field for a variety of reasons, and we should not fail to acknowledge those reasons.
yeah,
It could be like you said, you spoke about some of them: security,
yeah,
monetary. And I said you cannot say that teachers have to come in because it is for the public good, and
yeah.
say that they cannot look at private gain. I think that is a
No,
fundamental
I
issue
don't think so. That was
yeah.
the proposition. I think
No, I'm
that's
saying
the
that's not
problem.
something that's been,
Yeah.
in the sense being addressed enough across the board.
Okay.
I'm not saying,
Because
no,
I was trying,
I'm not saying
sorry.
only you are accusing you of that. So
Yeah,
that's,
yeah. No, I was trying to see what's the best way to articulate that conflict. See, to be honest, as a non-profit working in this space, there hasn't been significant things we've advocated for in terms of teaching, right? So today, when I look at the teaching system, And if you want to become a government teacher, I genuinely believe the entry barrier is quite high to become a government teacher. Once you finish your probation and you're once into the system, your retention barrier is quite low. So fundamentally, those dynamics have to change as well, right? It's not just about passion, bringing in people with that. There are also a lot of systemic things. Today, if we look at the affordable private space, and especially because of COVID, we've seen a lot of schools have shut down. Teachers are moving between schools from salaries of 1,200 rupees to 1,500 rupees because that's the difference it's making today, right? So that is where I'm trying to say that, how is teaching looked at as a profession, right? And while we are saying how do we bring the brightest and the most compassionate into the system, it is not to acknowledge that these are not the living realities of the teachers and things shouldn't be better for them. But I don't think so. That's a conversation that we alone can take, right? I think the entire conversations of what needs to change in teaching has to come significantly from parents, students, and more importantly, teachers themselves and the unions that represent them. And so unless conversations doesn't take place in that scale, I don't think so. I'll only be fooling myself to say that we've taken steps in that direction. Yeah.
I think Melly had a question. Melly, if you...
Thank you, Ramesh. So I'm with Asha for Education, and we support lots of education projects across India. And like you, I've had a long interest in the public system. So my question comes from that point of view. While I agree that the teaching profession could be more respected and that would help draw more talent, I would also argue that the existing government school teachers, there is a pool of talent among them. At least that's what we have observed. And the problem seems to be more systemic. I mean, even the brightest among them, they come in, they get caught in the system. There is poor reward and punishment things in place. And the whole thing is really complicated. But we have found that when you're given the right kind of, let's say, the right, like when you encourage them to have target goals to work towards, they take great pride in the profession and they want to do well. I mean, the inherent desire in everyone to do a good job. I mean, we're able to tap into that. And we keep seeing now and then examples, right? There are some extraordinary teachers among even in the government school system as well. So I just wondered, how you have, as a Teach for India, which is outside the government school system, how you have tried to, and where you have been successful in kind of trying to change the system, because we find that it's a big struggle in Asha for Education. It's very hard to do.
Yeah. I mean, there have been a lot of conversations, to be honest, around this, right? Should we, work with the existing teacher recognitions and teacher awards, which are part of the system, but once we kind of got into it, we realized that it's too political for us to be involved. What we've done over the years is actually provide platforms and opportunities to kind of put bright spots. Even in my own role as working in government relations, I have seen a lot of teachers and school leaders and principals who bring in phenomenal work, right? And their support has only actually, further, accelerated the progress we could make together with students. And what we have done in our best capacity is to actually put the spotlight on them, learn from their experiences, kind of present that to other fellows, to others who are our partners. Even the conference document, which I think Praveen has shared in the chat window, you would see that there are a lot of teachers, including government teachers, who had this platform to showcase either their opinions or their live class, and in fact get feedback on it as well. And recognition for with what they do. So that's been our limited work there. I think these are conversations. I think even what Ramesh was hinting to is our larger conversations of advocacy, and that is where we believe in the coming decade we need to play a bigger role. So in fact, one of the things which we are focusing on in this coming decade is advocacy. We want to understand like what are key priorities towards which we can, mobilize people, partners, organizations, much as yours as well, resources, and really kind of make it, as part of the conversation. Like today, there is conversation around malls being opened and spas being opened and closed, and there's of course an economic angle to it. But Nobody's even ready to consider a conversations about what is the impact of schools being shut down on children and what do we need to prepare for schools to reopen, right? There is also a lot of unemployment cost in the affordable private schools, but I feel these are all conversations of larger advocacy. While do we believe that our vision is to kind of work through all these challenges, we don't believe it to do it directly through the fellowship and the organization. That's where our alumni today who are working either with the government or starting up their own organizations are kind of tackling these challenges in different ways.
Yeah, I find as a great impact of Teach for India. I see all of the Teach for India graduates come out and do all kinds of extraordinary things, and that's very kind of inspiring. And we say that a little bit in Asha for Education as well. People spend some time with the organization, then they go off to do wonderful things. It's great to see.
Yeah, thank you.
I think Radhika had a question. Radhika.
Hi, Ashwath.
Hello.
Very, very refreshing to see a young, guy who's so passionate about education and, advocacy and changing the system. So it was very interesting to hear you. And so, of course, I've made a lot of remarks and questions in the chat box. But that besides, today's one of the news that I heard was about Kitex group of company, wanted to, start an industry in Kerala. And as always, I think it's about 6 decades or more that I know, Kerala has never allowed industry inside. And it's, although it claims to be 100% literacy state and gets all the crowning glory, in India and abroad, I don't know. What do you speak of education and why are we investing so much on education and what are we really investing on? I mean, what are we really talking about? So I don't know. I'd like to hear youthful remarks from you and Praveen.
Yeah, I mean, my take on this is that there's just more to education than cultural context and identity. I think how people in Kerala kind of look at their society and what they want to prioritize might be different from, say, another state or another region. And those differences might be within the state as well. While education definitely has a role to play, you clearly said it's literacy. It's just one aspect of education. So while Kerala has good numbers with enrollment and literacy, I think the question of what is an excellent education, what is a purposeful education is still up and open for debate, no matter how well a state is performing or not.
There are more questions, hovering around the same point. So I'll ask them as well.
Yeah,
I think they don't want to let you go. So there is one from H.L. Satish which says, teaching is never taken as a profession by both practicing teachers as well as the administrators. So what are the possible reasons for this and how do you think we could look at overcoming this problem?
Yeah, so there's a very interesting study called as systems thinking. I don't know if this is something familiar with, but they say that no system is really broken. Every system is achieving the outcomes it's intended to do. It's just different that you don't agree with that outcomes, right? And so when I'm kind of building that analogy, like while we are saying that things should change, the question is, are people in the system asking those questions and having that exposure, right? So unless those things fundamentally change, Ramesh, I don't think so, we'll be able to kind of look at this. I don't know if that made sense. I'm happy to elaborate if you want me to.
I'll wait. I think Praveen has...
one question I thought I'll sort of bring back because we have limited time on the clock. So about the teacher education platform, there has been a sort of explosion of number of options available. The government themselves have sort of rolled out the Swayam platform.
And Diksha.
Diksha, I think mostly for the students, but the Swayam is more focused on the teachers themselves. So while there is, I think, in terms of access to content, teachers have had access to content. What the platforms are actually achieving is being able to curate them and make it much more presentable, absorbable by the teachers. But at the end of the day, I mean, is there enough time and energy for a fatigued teacher to take up more courses?
Yeah.
So do you have takers
Yeah.
that way?
I mean, the last 1 year, definitely, there's been this momentum of EdTech. Even we've seen our user base just double over a period of few months. So there are two pieces of information here, Praveen. So one is that, given our current demographics and population largely being in 20s, 30s, we do see that the number of children in the coming decade or two are going to significantly rise, which means that the existing infrastructure, which is your brick and mortar, which is your actual buildings, we need to actually build them at the rate of almost, few schools every 2 weeks and a college every couple of weeks to actually meet the current requirements. Forget the for the next 30 years, we have to go in that rate. So at some level, technology is kind of playing a role. Whether we accept it or not, I think eventually it is kind of going to play a role, because it's just not possible to kind of grow and expand at that rate, infrastructurally speaking, right? While that is there on one hand, I think the other piece is that we've seen that what it can do is that can it provide basic access. Like you are right, like the entire information access can be taken care through technology platforms, right? But that would also kind of push us to say what the purpose of education is, because when coming back to your point around current edtech platforms, let it be of private sector companies which are aimed at students, or non-profits or government organizations, right now what we are reporting is basically what's the amount of content we have, how much content is consumed, how many users are there, but really there is not like a track of what is being impacted, right? So while this is something which is unavoidable, I think it will take its own pace. So you're right, there's going to be Zoom fatigue, there's going to be all of those things that's going to play out. But I think eventually we are moving into a system where I've heard this from a teacher who said that technology is not going to replace teachers, but teachers who use technology will replace those who don't. Right. So I don't know what's the right equation. I don't know what's the right balance. We are all in the pursuit of it. For the first time, I feel the education system in itself has paused. While you see healthcare, even entertainment, kind of really move forward with how science and technology has progressed, we've not seen that in our classrooms. And so I think it's anybody's guess there.
Yeah, one more question related to the last 1 year. There was a report yesterday which quoted the availability of internet connectivity in schools, and it kind of highlighted how abysmally low the connectivity has been, especially in the government schools. Now, in Teach for India, have you had some innovative experiments which you have tried, succeeded, failed, which you would want to share?
Yeah, I don't think so. It's innovative. I think the lockdown, the pandemic immediately kind of pushed us. It really got us going, scattering in different directions, because we suddenly started hearing about, students, parents losing jobs. There's just a complete change in the economic situation, people falling ill. So the first 3-4 months, we just basically channelized our resources to raise funds, work with governments, NGOs in distribution of ration and essential needs. After a few months, while there was some kind of a handle in that situation, we started to really understand what's the status of learning, and we realized that most of our students do not have access to a digital or a handheld device. And secondly is the internet connection. So what we did is we basically raised funds to provide students with tablets. We tried to see who are students. We started with secondary grades first, and then moved backwards. We try to take account of who are students who already have it. While we've done all this, which is not a very innovative suggestion, I think the innovation happened on how we delivered asynchronous and synchronous learning. Praveen, I think I'm more than happy to share material and what we've learned. In fact, some of our teams have put down research reports based on what's been effective and what's not. But in terms of tackling the challenge, we only were like, how do we send packets home if we cannot send devices for them to learn? And where fellows spend a lot amount of time is actually creating content which children can learn on their own. And how can we engage in smaller groups in live space? Because running a class of 40 like this is not going to be effective, right? I think what we are seeing as the future in terms of innovation is that even if schools reopen, the blended form of learning will continue, because schools now are pushed to think beyond information transfer, because now that can happen asynchronously or at their own pace. And so with the information, how are you really getting young people to, you know, collaborate, to do something about it? Like, think about it in the Bloom's taxonomy as well. I think that's where these classrooms and those spaces have potential to evolve to.
So one last question, and we'll move to your closing remarks. A couple of questions actually clubbed together. I know TFI is a fairly urban-centric program. So how do we get the benefits to the rural areas? And because I've seen that even within the government system, while there is a deficiency of teachers, the deficiency is actually in the far-flung areas. There is a higher concentration of teachers in the urban areas. So how do we expand the reach, or how do we get the benefits of TFI into the rural areas?
Yeah.
And the second part to the same question was, there are also a lot of affordable private schools who are part of this event here. How do we share our experiences or learn from each other's experiences again? Is there any avenue for that?
Yeah. So I'm glad we are agreeing that there's some benefits, and there's, at least it makes sense to explore this, to go to different areas, at least the program as such. You're right, we are currently centered in urban areas, but we are working in English medium schools run by governments and affordable private schools, where there is still, you know, shortage of teachers. So we kind of don't force our way. In fact, we go, school leaders actually say there's a need, they understand the program, and that's how the entire process happens. While that's been happening, Praveen, I think what has happened is our alumni, right? Some of our alumni have actually gone back to set up schools and other initiatives from places they've come from. It could be tier 2 cities, it could be rural areas. We in fact have a program called as TFIX, right? And if I could just quickly share my screen to kind of just show you. So TFIX is basically taking the TFI model and making it available in areas where Teach for India is not there. So just a second. So here the blue dots which you see is where Teach for India, the fellowship model is there. And there TFIX over the last few years has basically kind of taken that fellowship model towards student learning to these different places. And in the coming decade as well, as I was telling you that we are really thinking about advocacy, we are also expanding our regions. So we are exploring tier 2 cities, and we are also exploring to say that if today we are in Chennai or Hyderabad, can we look at a 50-100 kilometers radius in that geography? I think in the first decade, we had to operate with where, you know, we felt we could mobilize resources and bring in talent. And over time, it is to really diversify that. That's what we are focusing on in the coming decade. To your second question, in terms of affordable private school teachers who are part of it, I think one is, first of all, I think the way the pandemic has affected them is significantly different from, you know, how it's affected other teachers. I think it's kind of pushed in terms of job security, modes of income. I think it's affected in multiple levels, and these are situations beyond the teacher's control. If parents are not willing to pay fees, then where is the school going to have the money to kind of provide? I mean, I do know a few principals, especially in Mumbai, who've gone beyond and about to really support their teachers, if not directly through financial, through different ways. I think currently, I would like to actually know, like, what is, you know, the need and how we can help. What we are trying to do, Praveen, in the coming year with the conference this year, is we are really trying to double click on how has the pandemic affected a child and a teacher, right? And really bring that story out in the forefront, you know, put it out in the media, both in terms of the truth of how deeply it's affected, and and also the hope where we've seen some people who have been able to be resilient to change certain things. But if you have something specific in terms of how we can bring the affordable private school teacher network together, more than happy to explore that, because we work with a lot of them.
Yeah, when I asked that question, one of the things I had in mind was by running the program for about 12 years in diverse communities, there's a bit of learning that happens with respect to how the processes we develop. So there is an opportunity for the schools to learn from
Absolutely.
that knowledge base that you would have built on. So is there a possibility to access or interact with?
Most of it is available on our online platform Firki, and it's available in 5 Indian languages as well, as I mentioned. I've shared my email address. If there's even if there's a single private school or a network of private schools or a group of teachers in a school who want to explore it, feel free to reach out to me. More than happy to take that forward with them.
Ramesh?
Yeah, so I think you go to your closing remarks. Probably a 2-minute closing remark.
Yeah, I think this has been a very interesting space, right? Because these questions are very important to ask in terms of what today. Actually, earlier I was attending another webinar, incidentally, which is on the status of the Indian judiciary and policing system. And they were talking about how, because of COVID, they brought in Zoom calls for pre-trial cases where, alleged prisoners or convicts have to go and report and mark attendance in police station or at a court, and how now they're doing it. And an unintended consequence because of that is that it actually lost time for them to access legal counsel or meet family, which usually happens in courts and these places when they go, right? So I think the reason behind sharing that is that while there's the pandemic and while there are a lot of experimentation that's happening, I think it's a phenomenal opportunity for the sector, right? I think more and more the voices, at least we are hearing within the sector, is that teachers play an important role. And in the coming decade, it's actually teachers and students co-creating what an education needs, right? So I think when we're looking at it in that sense and constantly being pushed to say, are those beliefs still true? Pushed to say, like, what are other ways in which, we can attain that? I think that is a very important conversation, a space like this has provided me personally. I'm actually, if I'm going to save the chat, before I drop out, just to go through the different responses and the energy of the participants who are here. I think just in closing, I would just say that I'm really grateful to the work teachers have done. I have my own aunts and uncles who've been teachers and professors, and I just know what's the kind of influence they've had on me. And so I just hope that there's just more power and more support to teachers as we move forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashwath. I think that was that was a wonderful conversation, and typically good conversations, leave you with more questions than answers. I think that's what this is done. So, and that's a good place to begin with, to begin the next conversation. And I'm going to take you up on your offer of having a much longer conversation. So probably I'll be reaching out to you for a conversation again. And also, so thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you for all the great work that you've been doing, right through you and your organization. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank all of the participants who've kept coming. We are at 48. We have 2 more to go before we end this season of Guru Manthan. And therefore, thank you very much. Next week, we'll have Ms. Maya Menon joining us, founder director of the Teacher Foundation. And we look forward to having you all again next week. So thank you everyone, and have a great week.
Thank you, Ramesh, and good luck for the 50, and fantastic job on the series. I know there's just 2 more to go, but if this is open for other teachers, more than happy to share it with our user base as well. I think just more such opportunities are always good.
Sure. Thank you, everyone.